Hello guys, I hope everybody is doing good and everybody is able to see me, hear me and see the screen properly. Can I get a quick confirmation on chat if you're able to see me, hear me and see the screen properly? Today we're going to be looking at the GARP SCR important concepts for the upcoming exam of 2025, which is the April 2025. We're going to be focusing on what important concepts per book you should be focusing on to prepare for the actual exam. Okay, so I'm going to be looking at each chapter, few important concepts which I want you to make sure that before you go to the exam you read them properly. Okay, so let us start with the first chapter. Okay, I am marking this chapter as star. I'm marking this chapter as star. Okay, but why? Because what happens is, historically what I've seen is a lot of students who are going for this exam, they underestimate this chapter and they end up facing an actual issue in the while doing a revision or basically while going to the actual exam. Okay, so I've highlighted few important points. Okay, out of that, energy balance concept is very simple. In the exam they might give you a scenario connected with say 2-3 years, and you want to see that whether the energy balance was properly there in few of the years or not. Okay, then there is unforced variability. There's one question, if I'm not wrong, in the GARP sample paper which you can also see, and in the curriculum also, that similar kind of question can be expected in the exam with some tweak here and there. So unforced variability is also a very important concept. I have given a list, but within that also I'm highlighting which concept has been tested effectively. Okay, so next is albedo effect. When we talk about albedo effect, the idea over here is that what is the impact of albedo effect? Okay, the questions or scenarios might be driven like that. What is the impact? Okay, so they can test you over the concept like that. Okay, then the concept, last concept, the carbon capture, sequestration, and also the carbon geoengineering concept. Now this concept is double star. Okay, this is basically connected to the mitigation technique which is generally being used in the exam. So in the exam, from the chapter 1, they will obviously try to understand why the climate risk, climate change is happening, but they will also ask you few questions explicitly focusing on what we can do in the future. Okay, so main focus of the chapter is to help you understand the mitigation part. Hence, the last part is very, very important from the exam topic perspective to prepare for the exam. Then there is one second chapter, sustainability. Okay, the chapter is easy. Okay, the chapter is sufficiently easy. Okay, there are few basic concepts which are being tested at the start of the chapter, but there is one table or one section which is given in the book which talks about the nature-based solution. That entire section or that area is very, very important for you to remember and prepare. Okay, then there is two or three pages focusing on nature's capital. Okay, then there is eco services, then there is earth related services. All of these nature capital related concept is also important, which has been tested in the past exam. Okay, tested in the past exam. Greenwashing as a concept is also important. They have updated the content with some sections of greenwashing. They're talking about the area where they're talking about the different versions of greenwashing, which you should remember properly. So again, marking it as star. Okay, PRI related content is also very, very important. So when you're preparing from that chapter, okay, PRI related rules, how you can participate and all of that is important from the exam perspective. This is with respect to your second chapter. Okay, let us move to the third chapter, the climate risk change. This is where the physical risk, transition risk is actually being explained in detail, right? So over here, the types of risk and the basic versions of what all things are there in physical risk, what all things are there in transition risk is important. Okay, then there is a concept of in fact all the pointers which I've written over there, they are ultimately important, very, very important for the exam perspective. Okay, standard asset, okay, as a concept was also being effectively asked in the previous exams, okay, with scenarios. Then there is a concept of just transition. If there is going to be a transition to a different policy, how the people who are going to get impacted will be taken care. So that concept also obviously you should focus more on. Then in this chapter, you'll find two case studies. I have explicitly marked because this electricity generation case study has been asked in one of the previous exams. So you should be clear on these concept and case studies. In the entire curriculum, you'll find a lot of case studies, but few of them are explicitly there, okay, which are tested in the exam. And all of these pointers are important. Do not miss them. When you're doing your final revision, also make sure you go through all of them properly. Sustainability, climate policy, and culture and governance. Now this chapter overall is important because it talks about the very core concept of Paris Agreement. Okay, this has been tested, the features of the Paris Agreement, how it was different from Kyoto Protocol, and all of these pointers are tested in the exam. Now this cumulative and current, okay, you can find a question where they might give you scenario that you're representing, say, China, you're representing India, and in that UN Council, they are basically highlight you're supposed to put a point against the emission. So you should be clear about what is your viewpoint against the cumulative, talking about the cumulative assumption, cumulative part of the emission, and also what the current emission each country is posting. So what is going to be your view? That is basically being tested in the actual exam. Then you have GHG accounting. This is important not only from the exam perspective, but in real life. When you go and do the join any organization for climate risk, GHG accounting is very, very important. Okay. Drawbacks of green taxonomy. These pointers are, first, obviously you need to understand what is green taxonomy. Then there is EU green taxonomy. That concept is also being asked in the exam. And what are the problems? How companies are bypassing the rules, or what are the problems that have been created? So that point, this case study, when you read also, you'll understand the macro prudential impact and micro impact. Case study of England, Bank of England is very, very important. So make sure that you have gone through that case study also. Rest, all the points are important, but I explicitly am talking about few points which I've highlighted, which I have some idea that, okay, this has been tested in the past exam, or this has been covered in some way in the curriculum properly, or in some way I have understood, or people have highlighted me that this was tested in the exam. The next topic is green and sustainable finance. Okay, see, this EU taxonomy is important, and this case study is very, very important. This case study was also being tested in one of the previous exams. This is what I've come to know when I've talking to people who appeared for the exam. They've highlighted that, okay, few case studies have been tested. So important from that perspective. Then ICMA green bond principle is also double star. You should remember the principles and mention that there's a section in the book where they have explicitly talked about it, right? So focus on that properly. Climate risk measurement and management. Now this, from here, actually the next two chapters are slightly related to modeling. Okay, now over here the climate value at risk is very, very important. Then there is ING Vaishyas. The ING as a group company, what is their climate risk? They've done some climate risk analysis, so that case study is also very important. Then the last two section, risk assessment and risk prioritization. Actually, there are a lot of things in the last part, but I've only focused on two section, which I'm telling you to make sure that you go through these concepts properly before the exam. Okay. Climate model and scenarios. Okay, over here the IPCC scenarios, very, very important. Some section of this is also there in your first chapter. Okay, so from the exam perspective, this is tested heavily. Then TCFD recommendation is also very important, which has been tested in theory in two combinations of questions in the actual exam. Then Citibank case study, important. PACTA, this is also a small case study, okay, which is generally testable. Sector decarbonization pathway, also important. So actually this chapter is heavy weighted. This chapter and the previous chapter, both of them are heavy weighted. So when you're doing revision also, make sure you start with these two chapters first. Okay, this is nothing but your 7th chapter. Then net zero, which is the 8th chapter. Actually the weightage for net zero is very small. Okay, the overall when you see the scheme of things. Okay, but there are few points which was tested in the previous two exams. Okay, the concept of double materiality, this is very, very important, and conceptually you should be clear. Okay, what is the logic of double materiality. Then there is this portfolio assignment tool, okay, which has some parameters that can be tested in the actual exam. Then these two, production based accounting and consumption based accounting, okay, how you should calculate the carbon emission, where the production is happening or where the consumption is happening. Okay, important. You again can get some theory based question over here. 7 attributes that net zero target should ideally have, again important from the exam perspective, so you can definitely read that section properly. Next, we have 2 new chapters which were added in the last exam, the last October exam. Okay, again I have highlighted the important parts over here. The water risk assessment, there has been case study in the last exam on this. Again, that case study was very tough. Okay, you might not be able to complete all the 4 questions, so 1 or 2 questions also you should be good enough to clear the exam. Okay, then the Bank of England climate stress testing program, XR stress testing program, important. Then LEAP, there's one section over there which is which covers 1 or 2 page, that should also be important for the exam to prepare properly. Okay, so from the 9th chapter, decently good. I've tried to give you some pointers, some sections which you can prepare properly. The last chapter of your curriculum, okay, over here the control and equity share approach, both of them are important. Okay, they have been testing in the previous exam. In terms of the case study, if I'm not wrong, they focused more on the last part. Okay, measured challenge of financed emission and the zero board toolkit. So you can focus on these 2 pointers also from the exam perspective, but most important is the equity and the control approach. Okay, so overall these are the 10 chapters that are there in your curriculum. I've tried to give you sections which are important, but there is also required reading. Now, if you go to the required reading list, there are, I think so, 6-7 required reading, and few of them are very big. There is one on risk management also. Okay, but from the required reading, okay, I am explicitly highlighting 2. Okay, one is the NGFC section. Okay, few pages from there, and this is double star, very important. Okay, if you have not seen that, please make sure you go and watch it. This section has the case studies, the formula based questions which are being tested in the actual exam. Okay, and in the past exam we have also seen a few very basic questions with respect to liquidity ratio. Then you have asset test ratio, leverage ratio, interest coverage ratio. All of this has been asked, which is not explicitly mentioned in the curriculum, in the book, but these simple questions were also asked in the exam. If you're coming from a finance background, you'll be able to pick it up. Okay, now this last required reading, chapter number 6, has around 10 formulas. Make sure you're completely good with the formulas, and people who have joined our batch, they have the question bank on that formula based questions also, right? So practice those properly, because in the overall exam 90 question, I'm expecting 5 at least question based calculation based question, 4 to 5 questions. Okay, and if you want to clear the exam, my understanding is that out of 90, 60 should be a very good number. If you're able to come around 60 or close to 60, then you should be able to clear the exam. Out of that, out of total 90, based on the previous exams structure, around 40 to 50 is going to be very easy. The rest of them is going to be slightly tough, where you will have to eliminate option continuously. You'll have to look at the content. Okay, case studies are, in the last exam, both the case studies were tough. Okay, so don't go with a very high expectation, in the sense, don't get demotivated if you're not able to solve the question case study. Okay, what has been the general feedback, that out of 2 case study, a lot of students were able to complete 1 properly. In the second one, they were able to only pick up 1 or 2 questions, because the case studies are way too lengthy, okay, to read. So don't get demotivated over there. Make sure that you are good with all the 10 chapters. Start with the heavy weighted chapters first when you're doing the revision, and make sure that you go through the required reading of chapter number 6 with the formulas. Okay, so with this, we are going to close the session. This was just a short session talking about few important concepts that can come with your in your exam. Make sure all the topics which are given in the list, you read them twice before going to the exam. If you see any questions around it, please solve those questions also. Okay, so thank you very much, guys. If you have any query, you can reach us on our WhatsApp number, okay, which is this. we will be able to guide you and help you in your journey. Okay, so thank you very much guys for joining in.